right. Welcome, everybody. We hope your team is in the Final Four. Your favorite team.
Sure as hell ain't ours.
Sure as hell ain't our teams.
Oh, no, we got April Fooled. It's April 1st, 2025. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 947.
Oh, yeah, it is April Fool's.
I know.
Today we're going to talk about basketball.
Yeah, that was my April Fool's. That was your episode 947. I was trying to play a trick, but yeah, it didn't work out very well. Totally forgot it. But today it's April Fool's.
People still do that, man?
I'm sure kids do. I don't. I mean, I never have, but I'm pretty sure kids probably still do April Fools. I know today at school there was like mismatch close day. I don't know what it was. Hayden does it all the time. He's like, "Hey, can I wear this to school?" I'm like, "I don't care as long as you're covering your chest and your legs. Whatever, dude. Wear whatever you want, however you want. Don't care."
Ironically, I just had to take off my sweatshirt. I was getting hot. Sitting here. Chest out.
It's a chest out.
Yeah.
Oh man, shirtless. Got the hair springing out everywhere, tickling the microphone fuzz. We're podcast what 8? We're in all ours. We're podcast what 842.
Yeah. Oh, did I miss? I didn't even hear what you said.
I said we're podcast 947 or something.
Oh, that was our April. Man, we were getting clever.
Clever. Right. I know. I'm clever. More and more clever as the day goes on. Hope you're all having a good start to your week. Hope you had an awesome weekend. It is officially spring. A lot of us had our first warm weather this last weekend, and boy, was it warm. And then I think we had like 80 here on Saturday, and then we went right back down to 30 on Monday morning. But yeah, spring is here, which means 'tis a season for coaches to have to reassure most all athletes they are not, in fact, losing their fitness when they go out and they're doing their first few runs in their 70s in 80-degree weather. And it's also allergy season, so everybody gets to complain about the pollen, how hot it is, how out of shape we are, and that's basically the next 2 to 3 weeks for triathlon training. It's we're out of shape and we can't breathe, and I'm sick, and all the kind of fun things but you got more fun things that are legit fun things. Got the first 2 big races here in North America this weekend. You got Texas 70.3, which is not a pro race, but it's always got a really big age group participation. So that's this weekend on Sunday. Then you got Oceanside 70.3, which is on Saturday, and that's as kind of always has been. It's the kind of North American kickoff for the racing. It'll be on Outside TV. I think it's how it's streamed from Ironman Live. Hopefully they do a lot better job than they did in Geelong, because that was a disaster. I watched a little bit of the Ironman South Africa on Sunday morning when I woke up late, but I tuned in for about 10 minutes because your boy Magnus Ditlev was ahead by like 19 minutes. I feel like he was just smoking everybody. So I turned that off. But yeah, this weekend, pretty loaded field. You got Gustav Eden, you got Christian Blumenfelt, you got Lionel Sanders. Women's race isn't nearly as big. Oh, and then you got the PTO race in Singapore. So it's a lot. I know it's going to be nice this weekend, but it's also a really solid weekend to get in some solid trainer action. Watching those races, they're both going to be broadcast live. I'm not sure the Singapore timing and what I know that it'll be streamed on. But yeah, great weekend of racing, and I think it's going to be really, to me, we don't talk a lot about the pro races. We don't do interviews and stuff, but I'm going to be very interested to see how Christian Blumenfelt, Gustav Eden, and Lionel Sanders do. I think I talk about the women at the at Oceanside, but I think Paula Finley is probably going to run away with that since she always does well there, and it's a pretty weak field. And then Taylor Knibb dropped out of Singapore, which actually might mean it might be like a halfway decent race to watch because it'll be competitive. She won't blow everyone's doors off by 15 minutes. But the reason I find those 3 athletes interesting is, one, they're both high quality, high caliber athletes, but 2, they've all gone through coaching changes over the last 6 to 8 months. Obviously, Lionel Sanders goes through a coaching change basically every quarter, or at least changes his like training philosophy, which he has gone from his like mega volume, mega intensity to lower volume with right intensity at the right time, at least as he says. And then Gustav Eden, the Norwegian train, with the Christian Blumenfelt, 2 probably the better long course athletes on the planet. They have separated from their previous coach, Olav Alexander Boo, and they are I think, kind of coaching themselves.
When did that
Blumenfelt,
happen? I'm not paying attention.
I know, but you don't need to. That's what you got to me here for.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think it was. I think that was always planned. Like after the last Olympic cycle, that they were going to kind of go and start and do their own thing. So they're coaching. The rumor is they're like coaching themselves / each other, like as a unit, which I find really interesting. But
that sounds like LeBron and Dwayne Wade getting together.
It's right. It's right. It's exactly. You just need Chris Bosch. Which could be Castor Stone because he's the other Norwegian.
Maybe
guy.
That's what Lionel's going to be doing here.
That's it. But to me, it's super fascinating because you don't see a lot of athletes at that level. Well, you are now, right? That are kind of coaching themselves, but they're all three kind of coming back from seasons that were incredibly disappointing. You have Gustav Iden, who barely raced at all last year. I mean, my last memory of him, you had him. It's just really interesting, right? And this is very true, I think, for age groupers, which is to me why he's so likable. Not to mention that he seems very funny and laid back. But you get two memories of him. So not last year, but the year before when he won Kona, and then Sam Laidlow was second, Christian Blumenfelt was third. Is he won that race, and a couple weeks later they had the Ironman World Championship 70.3 in St. George, and he pulled up and DNF'd. He was smoked, right? Which to me would have been like an insane turnaround. Blumenfelt absolutely dominated that day. If memory serves, Ben Canute was like on his heels for a little bit on the golf course, but ended up getting second place that day. So Blumenfelt took 70.3 worlds and a third in Kona, but had won St. George year before. So he had that, and then he had a couple injuries, and then he had the loss of his mother. And then this last year, he wasn't invited to come back on the Norwegian Olympic team, which is probably a good decision. He wasn't going to even sniff the front pack anyway. So this is kind of his return to form from injury and just from personal setback. Again, I think insanely relatable on an age group level is a lot of us go through the loss of a parent or, spouse or, depending how old you are, it could be, somebody else in your family. And you got Blumenfelt, who, was riding the high of an Olympic gold medal and the third place in Kona, 70.3 worlds, and had won St. George, when the World Championship was there. And then outside of Frankfurt last year and blazing and beating everybody to death after 2 3 weeks after the Olympics last year, a very disappointing Olympic showing. And so he's kind of coming back off a very disappointing year that he ended on, which is everybody was looking at him as being the first one to go up long distance and come back and dominate, and he was far from it. Super disappointing. And then you got and then now he's coaching himself, and I know he's changed things up in his training a little bit too. So you got a guy like that, that was dominating, but now is kind of find his way back again. Then you got Lionel Sanders, who is, I think, disappointed every year because he keeps changing his training philosophy, what he eats, what he's doing. Last year, I think he probably walked his way to 30th at Kona, he didn't do Kona last year. It was Kona last year. And so I think he's apparently changed things up a little bit. He's obviously been a father for a while, but it's always interesting to me to look at these early season races and how much certain athletes put on early season races, and this goes for age groupers as well. Right. In every season, you can look at early season performances, and Sam Long to me and Patrick Lange are the two best examples. Sam Long always comes out and dominates early in the season, and then the later the season goes, he tends to fizzle out, whether it's because he's training in the heat in Arizona or because he burnt all his biscuits earlier in the year. He never seems to put in a lot of great performances at the top tier races later in the year. Then you got, in my spectating history of the sport, I've never seen a male or female athlete be great at the latter part of the year that was also great at the beginning part of the year. I mean, for us, when we got into the sport, there were no televised races. There was no streaming. There wasn't no T100. There was no Ironman Pro Series. It was just, you heard about races and then you got to watch Kona. And the big names, they might race one, they might race a couple of same. They always wanted to get, you just wouldn't hear from them for months. Jan, you're where is this guy? Is he even going to be in shape? Is he even going to race? go out and crush your body. Danielle Reef, same way. We haven't heard from her. She crushed her body last year. Where's she going to come from? Dominates. Chrissy Wellington did it. Miranda Carefree, I think she won more Ironman World Championships in Kona than she did regular Ironman races. She always showed up on the big day at the right time, putting in the right effort to win the one that mattered most. And then the guys do it too. Like Craig Alexander, he would do it. Macca, they would. It's kind of the way it's always been done. And I think that's honestly why it's been so, not difficult, but more challenging for the professional of today, because there is so much more money on the table with the amount and frequency they can race. They can do 3-4 Ironmans and then 70.3s in a year and try to cash in on a $250,000 check from the Ironman Pro Series. They can race all these T100 races in these crazy locations and crazy flights and time zone changes and suspect water quality and take home a paycheck. But if you ask the ones that really want to win the big one, they just have to focus on the big one, the big race on the big day, which is for them, it's either Nice or it's Ironman World Championships in Kona. And I just think it's something that I think age groupers, again, coming back to what I was talking about with Gustav and Christian and Lionel and their kind of change their approach for this year, is how different age groupers should be prioritized in their year compared to professional athletes who race long distances or medium distances all the time. If you're one of those athletes and you got an early season race coming out, you want to do your best, but if you're looking at your training and you're trying to figure out the best way to periodize the rest of your season or to plan, if you're wanting to peak in September and October, you should be far from peaking right now. I mean, you couldn't be farther from peaking. And a lot of people keep inching their way up. They panic train. They do too much intensity, try to cram in way too much volume, and they find themselves in June and July cracking, which is, again, you see it a lot in the professionals. They're more likely shows up as to being injured. But again, it's one of my favorite weekends of the year when it comes to triathlon, because you get to see everybody out for the first time. You get to make early season picks for who you think are going to win the world championships. And, as for quick little memory, and then I'm going to shut up, I swear, Patrick Lange last year at Oceanside just got demolished. I mean, demolished. And then when it mattered most on race day at the Ironman World Championships, he demolished everyone. And it looked like he wasn't even trying. And so when you're looking at your early season races, put it in perspective. And if you're training, I wouldn't put all your eggs in the basket this early on in the year.
Yeah. Well, unless, it's, oh man, there's so much there to unpack.
I know. I was like panic packing.
Ritual.
I was the closet. I was like, I got to leave. I'm just going to toss in like every t-shirt I got, boxers, pants. I'm going to leave them for 2 days. But all I know is I'm going to have it with me. And if I need it, I got it.
So like Blumenfelt and Eden, they're not taking blood samples every time they climb a hill now.
I don't know. I bet you they are.
You think they're still into that? Okay. So, but yeah, I mean, what you're saying is like what kind of stood out to me there, especially at the end, was this idea of, we talk about pacing is racing, and then it's almost like pacing is your calendar too. It's like, we've talked about the analogies many times when like a underdog will come out against a great football team and just like be on fire in the first quarter, but slowly but surely just start getting mauled over the course of a game, because it's a long game or whatever. And the same goes for the season. I mean, I'm very curious about this concept of all these pros just changing coaching and changing philosophies and everything like that. And what that really means is that my first thought was that, like you were mentioning, there's so many races and so many opportunities. I just don't know certainly if the sustainability of that is realistic. Maybe, you can say in a season even, but long term, certainly. So it's like you almost have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going on here, because you want to get in there, and I'm sure maybe a Sam Long is like, well, my opportunity might be early, so it's like, let's go win some stuff and, and take my chances later. I mean, there's definitely different philosophies on that. If you're kind of thinking early season race, there's going to be a lot of people that aren't at peak form and you want to go out and, podium or something or have a great race against the field, that might be a good opportunity, but you have to almost like like you're saying, if you're going to peak early, you know, how are you going to get back to a place where you can kind of re-peak? And we talk about burning matches and how many you have for a year, like real matches, not like, you know, tough workout here and there, but you know, these are real things that, you know, like at least I've kind of noticed over the years as getting older and things like that. I have to be careful. I mean, I've been racing a lot for a long time, you know, fulls, and I just have to really kind of figure out a way. You know, it's like I've known for a little while, like right now, that I can't, you know, go as hard and be as hard as I used to be, because maybe I can, but I just sense that, you know, it's burning things out with life or whatever in a way. So I have to be careful and pick my spots. And I certainly am not an early peaker, as you know. So it's just really interesting to me how people like look at that, you know, how individualized it can be as well, as far as, you know, wanting to make sure that, you know, you're almost snowballing energy versus just like letting it drain out right in the beginning.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen this many changes in coaching, and Lionel doesn't count, but in coaching in like over a year span in the professional ranks. I mean, a lot of these athletes stick with these coaches for I mean, Ben Canute, he's no longer with Jim Vance. He was with for like decades. Kat Matthews, who got second at Nice and also second at 7.3 Worlds, she left her coach. Patrick Lange, before Ironman World Championships last year, he left his coach. Hayden Wild, who got second in the Olympics, left his coach. It's just, there's a lot of it's definitely not panic, but I think and the interesting part though is a lot of these athletes are starting to pick up like single sport only coaches, because they feel like that's where they're lacking in you know, their ability to maintain at the front. But
I think it's a dopamine fix, to be honest.
I mean, listen,
it's just the new world, man. It's like change,
right? And if you ask any coach, like that's you know, one of the biggest battles as a coach I think we all face, and this is the same thing for every self-coach athlete that can't string together an actual training block because they get so distracted, is that, and you see this all the time, right? With different training platforms or different training methodologies or programs people follow, is that anything you really do that's an abrupt change is going to elicit a response. Whether it's dieting, whether it's, you know, meditation, whether it's taking a cold plunge, whether it's changing up your training, doing just a slight deviation from what you're doing is going to elicit a response. But then, I mean, I think you referenced this, like maybe you and I were talking on the podcast. I can't remember if it was online or off, but you were like, yeah, I think I was just doing like maybe too much plunging, because at some point it becomes more of a stressor than it does a stress reliever, because you're still putting stress on your body, right? Even if you can tolerate it and you can be in the water in, you know, 30, 31 degree water for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes, you know, at some point there's got to be a diminishing return on your investment. And so but you start doing cold plunge or cold showers for like, you know, 30 seconds, build up to a minute and a half for a week. You might see like an initial effect. And then but then as like humans, our like initial feedback for ourselves is, oh, well, more must be better and colder must be better and more frequent must be better. But it's not. Right. Same thing with dieting. You stop having, you know, X, Y, and Z, and you start dropping weight. Like, this is the ticket. This is how I should live the rest of my life. And that might not be sustainable. Or with training, you might be doing one thing and then you can do a slight change and you see a benefit. And then now you're married to that one program. And so I think we're all aware of that, which is also why we chase these short-term changes, because we are getting short-term change, but we're not having a permanent, sustainable adjustment to what we're trying to fix, whether it be training, whether it be life, whether it be relationships, whether it be food, sleep, you name it. We like to be distracted because we get that, like you said, that dopamine hit of an immediate change. Having said that, a lot of it, I think, is also psychological, right? You and I, we lose athletes and we also take on athletes that just dropped, you know, another coach. That's the nature of the business. But what you also get is when you do something new, you're usually more bought in, and sometimes you just need a change just to change. That's it. You need something isn't feeding you the way it needs to be fed to you, and you just need to deliver it in a different way. Could be the exact same thing worded differently, but it's still going to elicit like a more engaged response because it's brand new, right? It's a brand new shiny thing. And it's like you give a kid a present for their birthday and they unwrap it and they take it out of the bag, and then they're more excited to put the tissue paper than the toy you bought them. It's like we like what we like. And so I think, when again looking at these pro athletes, I do think that one of the bigger changes you're seeing is there are quite a few that are starting to kind of coach themselves is there's a lot of information out there, but you have to have, the best triathletes in the world, they have a coach. Magnus Ditlev has a coach. Patrick Lange has a coach. Dan Lorang, he coaches the three, probably pretty much arguably the best female athletes on the planet. And a lot of the guys, it's just, I think it's, as age groupers, we have a harder time sticking with it because we feel like we need to see change quicker, but then change usually takes longer for us to get because we don't do as much volume. And we have to be even more careful with how much intensity that we do have, because every minute that we have matters just a little bit more. And the other thing I think is it has to be taken into account for age groupers is again, and that's the coach's job, right? Is to empower an athlete to make these decisions on their own, feeling autonomous, feeling in control. They're part of their plan. They're not working the plan. They're an active participant in the success of the week, of the training block, of whatever cycle that you're in, getting ready for that race. They have to be an active participant in that. I'm sure some of it's also financially related. Like if you don't have a coach, you're not splitting a certain percentage of your paycheck, and I'm sure that's nice. Or they look at it, well, if I can get a new coach and I can then win this, then it's going to pay for getting this new coach or having this higher percentage. Age groupers, we don't have that problem. There's just so much, I think, information that it's oftentimes overload into what we want. So I think the simpler you can have it, the better. But also, to me, it does just come down to fun. Like watching a couple of Lionel's videos, because I was curious to see not the training that he was doing, but how he looked. Because every time I'd see a video of him, or have someone send me a video that he made, he just always looked like shelled and genuinely like an unhappy human being. And to me, that just screams like overtrained. And I will say, like the last video or two, like he seems a little more lively, and happier. And you don't know if it's real or not because it's on a video, but that to me would be a red flag for the rest of the professional field, knowing as good of an athlete as he is, that maybe he's not going to come into these races overtrained, but it also makes you like the training more. And so I think liking what you're doing is liking and believing in what you're doing, whether it's work or in a relationship or with training. If you can check those two boxes, there's a pretty high likelihood you're going to be successful, because you're not going to have doubt. You're not going to have dread. Then you're going to get it done, right? Because you like what you do and you believe in what you're doing. If you don't like the training that you're doing and you don't believe in it, then you're going to find reasons not to do it. You're going to find reasons to do it the opposite way. You're not going to listen to the workout. You're going to do whatever it is that you want to do. And that's just lack of trust. And it could be anything, right? For coaches, for athletes, it could be you don't trust your coach to put in the right program, or you just don't trust yourself enough to follow the program long enough to get the desired result. And I think that's a hard conversation for each athlete to kind of have is, but you got to like it. And as a coach, we've talked about this many times, we can know that a workout is going to be great for an athlete, but if they're not going to do it because they hate it, they hate high cadence, they hate low cadence, they hate hill work, they hate track work, they hate long rides, they hate this. You can give it to them because they like it, but if they're not going to do it, then you're getting a 0. So the best thing you can do is like, hey, I know that you like this. If I know you like this, I know you're going to get it done. not only are you going to get it done, but you're probably going to execute it better because you're more engaged. And if you're more engaged, you're probably going to have a higher output and a lower RPE relative to your effort. So you're going to get a better adaptation out of it versus I'm not good at these. Why do you keep giving these to me? You know, there can be a deficiency there. And a lot of times you just have to say, hey, listen, I know you don't like these, but we're going to get more of them, right? Because you have to get better at them. You have to be a well-rounded swimmer, cyclist, runner, triathlete. You have to do these. Some things you don't have to do. And so I think if you're able to kind of do that, but I think it's very hard. That's why self-coaching is so incredibly hard for people, is they lack that objectivity. They know what's fun, but they also want it to be perfect. And I think that's where we kind of draw the line with being the best versions of ourselves, you know, probably on the courses. You know, to me, it's like, I always tell everybody that I think the world would be such a better place if every single person on this planet had a therapist. And like, you know, if everyone got to go see a therapist every other week and it was completely free and it was funded by the government, this world would be a totally different place that we lived in. And just something I firmly believe in. I also believe that most all, if not all, people are better athletes with someone looking over their shoulder, supporting them, and removing the mental stress of creating their own workout or being so, or removing or adding objectivity to a lens that oftentimes they can't be objective. And so, you know, you could talk about coaching and talk about self-coaching and talk about changing and training. It is out there all the time. But the truth of the matter is the best training for you specifically is the training that you're going to respond the best to. And that response is usually comes from how you're managing stress, how willing you are to do the work, and how much you enjoy it. And that's it. I mean, because if you do that, then you're going to do more of it. And as we always say, you know, the best ability is availability.
Yeah, and I've talked to, you know, many athletes who have come to me about coaching, and a lot of times what they'll tell me is that, and is that they get towards their race, and they're just, you know, tired and not looking forward to it. They don't have, you know, they're not alive and they're not springy or whatever. And I think that's very common. I mean, I've even had athletes that I've coached up to that. And you know, that's one of those things that I really try to avoid is like, you know, if you don't have, you know, we've talked about it, if you kind of have like apathy for the race, you're probably overtrained, you know. And if you're kind of a nervous, you know, a little bit nervous and anxious, that's probably a good thing about, you know, wanting to make sure you can get it done or whatever. But so I think about these kind of things all the time. And to me, that's what, you know, I've been kind of like, as everyone probably is sort of playing around with AI or whatever these days. And it's just, to me, it's such a interesting thing because it just sort of spits information, and it really kind of always reminds me that, yeah, you know, it seems like the easy way to do things, but it never really feels like it's got heart or soul to it. And that's where I try to get with athletes, is sort of like in this place where there is a responsibility on the athlete, instead of, you know, like, just give me what it is and I'll do it, you know, that kind of stuff. Because I do think that varies. I've seen so much of it that, you know, on some days you might feel great, and I may give you an hour and a half bike ride and you feel like riding for another hour at least. And I'm like cool with that, but you have to be in tune with it. And so I'm always trying to be in that place, or like, you know, with 30-minute runs, and, you know, like everybody wants, you know, quote unquote, more speed work or whatever. And I'm like, well, mix a few things in there if you're feeling good, and just kind of let it go, because you don't need a ton, like, you know, percentage wise of speed stuff. You know, it should be in there, but like, as far as what we're doing, if you're doing it right, you know, speed work is, what's that thing we always used to say, that the mantra is sort of like, you know, you get burned out by going too far, or wait, no. Most people don't go easy enough on their long stuff or hard enough on their hard stuff, you know, and that's
they're always stuck in the medium.
Yeah. You know, so that's like a thing that I just think is, you know, frankly, on the athlete, you know, it's sort of like you have to get there. And if you really, you know, we've talked about, you know, training plans are training plans, and most are probably in the ballpark. Now, how are you going to work it? How are you going to actually handle it? You know, and you mentioned plunging earlier, and I just, like I've gotten to the point where now where I'm not even necessarily thinking of plunging as a benefit to me. It's the process of getting in there, because every time it's difficult. It's like, shit, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it because it builds a habit of like going through something difficult in my mind. So, and then I created this scale of zone 1 through zone 4 plunging. So sometimes I'll go harder in the paint, and other times I'll just kind of get in and get out, so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like variables in there that I feel, at least that's what I try to talk to athletes about. It's like some days you just don't have it, whatever. And forcing it, I think, can, start digging a hole. I mean, it's like if you think of the whole season as like you're just starting to shovel, and you don't want to go too deep too early, and it is a patience game. It's like, how are you going to pace your season? And you pace your day. I mean, you can break it down all over the place. And I just think it's really interesting, that stuff you bring up about Lionel, and how, I just always think that we can go to the well. Everybody has that potential, but like if you go to the well just too much and you got that sort of hollowness about you, I mean, that's a telltale sign for endurance athletes in my book. It's like, how alive do they look, And really it's all about, I think 99% of the people, age groupers, get into this because they want to be healthier, and feel better. And if the actual vehicle for that is making it worse, that's a problem.
I was before or earlier today, I was listening to an interview with with Olav Alexander Boo, and he was asked. I always like listening to him. I think his answers are way too long, but I'm sure mine are too, so I can't really say anything. But he always says, it depends a lot, or, taken within context. But it was fascinating listening to him talk. He was asked a question about if what's one thing you might change or you've learned the last year that you might change kind of going forward. And what he talked about was the impact of stress, and I do think that's where AI and very like overprescribed, like, here intensity control and lactate and all these kind of different things, like this becomes such an obsession with executing things on such a precise level. And we are not robots. We are humans. We have hearts, we have feelings, we have brains, we have stresses, we have emotions, we have trauma, we have all these different things that we take into, we have depression. We have all these things that we battle each day that raises or lowers our stress, that raises or lowers our inflammation, our cortisol, everything. And it was interesting hearing him talk, because he said the impact of, you cannot quantify outside stresses, additional impact to your training stress. And so you can, and that's where I think we become so we overprescribe down to such a granular detail in everything that we do, because it makes us feel more specific and more detailed and more dialed in. But we talked about this, I think it was last week, like my distaste for the TSS system, training stress score, or really any training stress score in any platform or software that's provided, because it doesn't show everything. And you could go out, and we always use climate as a huge factor in TSS, or load management within the day, like combined sessions. So I think last week or a week before, I gave you did an hour run in the morning and an hour run in the evening. Well, those, if they were exact same pace, exact same heart rate, they'd be scored the same, but they shouldn't be, because one was an increased load later on in the day that was going to be a lot tougher. Or sometimes if you go out and you ride your bike next week and it's 55 degrees and you do 3 hours at 200 power, you'll get 200 TSS. But if you go out and do it in August and the dew point's high and the humidity's high and you're having sun, baking your skin and maybe getting sunburn, exact same TSS. But it's not. It's a different stress on your body. And so when we overprescribe a session with small ranges or no ranges, I mean, I have athletes, a lot of the newer athletes that I work with, they're like, hey, why aren't you giving me like an exact watt? Hold 220. Because I don't want you to hold just 220. I want you to know a range and be within that range, because the range is good enough. But as we overprescribe and flaunt and, try to promote, precision, deathly precision and, no detail unturned. It's like there is no way. I mean, heart rate's the closest thing we have to understand fully the global stress that the human undergoes at certain exertion levels combined with emotional, mental stresses and fatigue. So you could wake up one day, right, and I'll use, Maddie, unfortunately, but like maybe a year ago, Maddie's around the house and you go out and you're having a good day, you got great sleep, you're not stressed. And I'm like, hey man, go out and hold, 180 watts for an hour and a half. You can hold it, no problem. Well, maybe when Maddie was sick before she passed away, maybe a week or two before that, you had a race coming up, you're super stressed, you're not sleeping very well, your mind's, with Maddie. And I say, hour and a half, hold 180. You could hold 180. But the stress on your body would be significantly higher than the one the year before. The mental effort required would have been substantially increased. The emotional toll it would have taken on you substantially increased. And the physical time to recovery substantially increased, because when our body is stressed, it doesn't recover as well. So when you're trying to be all about intensity control, all about prescription, all about everything, and you don't take it's easy, right? You're following directions. I'm doing this, and this. I've got to perform at this pace, especially the pro level, right? I've got to do this at this level to get this done at this speed to win the race. So I'm going to train in this, over precise, specific, detailed way that's going to get me to the finish line, because this is how it's done, because we're smarter than everybody else. But you can't take into account those other stressors and what kind of a person somebody is. And that's why the generic plans or some of the programs that, read and adjust on their own, it's not, I'm not going to call it cookie cutter, but it's like you just can't take that stuff into account. Period. And he didn't say this, and I'm not going to say that this is what happened, but I know that Gustav and Christian did a whole lot of the same training leading up to those big races. And I know Gustav got hurt after his mom passed away. Where those two are related or not, I wouldn't throw it out that those two are related. No. That you go through a hardship in life and you get injured, you're more stressed, you're trying to still keep up with the training, mentally, whatever it is. But you can't. That's the thing, right? You can't gauge it, you can't score it, you can't plan it, you can't put it on Strava, and you can't write it off as an excuse, and you can't write it off as a benefit. And I think it's just so hard to measure. And that's why it's so important for athletes to own their own feelings and where they are mentally and emotionally and how it's impacting where they are physically. Because you can't measure. As much as we want to measure everything, as many tools and devices and straps and sensors as we have now when we do our swims and our rides and our runs. I know we talked a little bit about, still going by RPE last week, but, it's a different requirement, the stress requirement to withstand those two. And so I think you can plan that out with precision as much as you want to, but if you're not taking that outside stress and what you're going through when you're not training and its impact on that, again, not climate, not wind, not even, it's almost impossible to score. And I think that presents problems when we try to be over detailed and how we have less wiggle room. I think that's when you're not willing to bend, you break.
Yeah. I just want to, I was going back to when you're talking about that precision of nailing workouts and, how, I guess, I don't want to say maybe stressful or intense it can feel to nail a particular watt for, a particular amount of time and things like that. And I just get 90% of what I do with my athletes is try to get them to quit overthinking. you know, I think of an example of like, like I've been playing drums again lately, and I would be like considered, you know, back of the pack age grouper in drumming, you know. And one of the things I know is like the minute I start thinking about it, it's almost like we talk about when you can see someone thinking on the side of the pool deck. It's the same shit. You know, the best drummers don't think. They just react. They've figured out, they've put precision into their form and their style and the way they handle, you know, like mechanics of things. And after that, they get out of the way and they just feel. They feel the music. And I think about like, you know, like a guy like Patrick Longa versus Lionel running. You know, you can just almost see that. I'm sure Patrick is just like flowing, you know, and Lionel's probably like, I got to run harder or whatever the case is. And it's just so weird to me to think like how these types of things play in at such a large level, you know, like it's the old, man, it doesn't even look like they're even trying thing versus, you know, I gotta like nail every single interval to this, but your form's off or something like that. So you're just working so much harder or whatever. You're not flowing. You know, I remember that book, was it called Flow or whatever the hell it was? It came out a long time ago. It's funny, like it seems like there's every once in a while, like books that really hit and like really cover things. And to me, that was one of them. It's sort of like, how do you get out of your way? You know, the overthinking is just unbelievable to me. You know, it's just like if you're going to be playing, you know, you watch some of these NCAA games and these kids are 18 years old and they've just mechanically worked at their process so much that they're not, you know, they're just doing shit on instinct. And that's when, you know, you see great athletes. You know, it's not always out there, you know, we talk about being 8 steps ahead of the game or whatever, but that's just like natural instinct. It's not forcing, you know, you're not out there solving a crossword puzzle every time you're on the basketball court. You just have to react or whatever. And I think that those are the interesting parts of this sport to me, is that, you know, rather than always, you know, having to just nail every single workout, like that's going to automatically put you somewhere you want to be. You know, it's going to help. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there's a different part of this sport in my mind where you have to be able to let go. I mean, you're going straight for a long time in every one of these things. You just have to like get that wall out of the way and just go, you know, and be free with it, because the minute you start thinking about too much, you know, like that's why I'm so big on RPE, is like you have to understand what that feels like. And you've talked about it many times about racing blind and how people have had great races because they're not tied to that, you know, limit. It's almost like a limiter in some ways to me. You know, if I feel great on an interval and you know, I can either like push it a little harder or I can like really find an easier place and nail it. You know, it's like it feels easy today. It's like, okay, I own this spot, or I could take it up if I needed to. And then those are the things that, you know, at least in some of the better races I've had where I've had that feeling out on the course where you feel like you're in control of the environment and what's going on rather than always fighting it. So where do you get there? You know, how do you get there? What are the, you know, what kind of things you need to work on to understand that and practice that versus always just trying to be at the TSS score or whatever like that. Like you're saying, it's like, it just becomes overwhelming to me. And, you know, I just think, you know, so many people could probably gain so much by just letting go.
To me, the detail isn't, I mean, yes, you can over detail things, but the detail to me isn't the problem. It's the unwillingness to waver and adjust and be flexible. Like, you know, guardrails are great. Right. To me, it's very similar. You know, GPSs are great. So you got a GPS and it's telling you to go straight. For some reason, it hasn't picked up. You know, you got guardrails. You're on the road. You're in your lane. You're driving your car. You're doing your workout, and you got your intervals coming up. And you pull up, and you can't go in it straight anymore because there's a construction. There's been an accident, and the GPS hasn't picked it up yet. But it's saying go straight. And you're taking a right and it says, you know, deviating, you know, do a U-turn. You're not going to do a U-turn. You're going to avoid it. You're going to no longer pay attention to what the device is telling you. You know with your eyes that this is the right decision for me to make, that I cannot go forward, that regardless of what it tells me to do, even though I've listened to it for the last 7-8 hours on this road trip and it's been on point, then I need to take a right here. And then I'll figure out a way to get around it. Same thing when you're working out. It's nice to have a guardrail. It's nice to know if I'm being aerobic or I need to be going hard or going easy, or even a watt range, right? That's, 10, 15, 20, 30 beats wide. That's nice, right? Because it gives you guardrails, it gives you something to shoot for. And that's good. But what's even better is the ability to know that, all right, well, and that's where heart rate comes in a lot for people, I think, because it can usually tell you like the internal stress, because it's usually like if you're stressed, right, and you're anxious, you have a higher heart rate. Blood pressure might even be up. You're stressed about going to the doctor, you're nervous about what your test results are going to be, you're probably going to track a worse BP and a higher heart rate because of the stress, not because of your general overall health, but of stress in the moment. Right? You got a meeting coming up, you're nervous, but you got to get a bike ride in. Wouldn't be shocked if your heart rate's higher. Right? And that's the thing. Like, you can go by power, you can go by specifics, but again, that's why heart rate still, to me, remains like almost the gold standard across all disciplines, because it gives you not the total view, but it gives you a much better idea of internally what your body's going through. If you're sick, you're fighting off something, it's going to be higher, right? You're taking, decongestants, it's going to be higher. Something else going on, it might be lower. You're not fueled up enough and you're going to bonk, it's probably going to be lower. You got nothing, you can't raise your heart rate, can't go hard enough, you got no fuel to do it. So that's why like using that metric too is a really nice metric to go by, because it gives you a much better idea of like what's going on internally. And it's just more of it's kind of your internal gauge of how am I doing mentally, emotionally, physically, and what you're producing is the result of the effort combined with how you're feeling, and then you get the result. But the stress can be totally different. And so again, like, pay attention to those things is great. Having guardrails is great, but making your own decisions is also great. And knowing that that's the way to go. And we're not here to say, every episode that be flexible and do this, but we should be, but I think it's great to see the benefits of being specific and also the drawbacks, because that's the big seller right now is being over specific and over detailed and adjusting on the fly, every 2 seconds. And there's a lot of ways you can go, and people sometimes we over listen to these things, right? Because there's so much information. We like our pre-built workouts. We like things that are specific. We don't like general, because we've gotten so used to having so much information out there that it's just so easy to come by. So we're just used to having it. But a lot of it also doesn't mean it's necessary. I get questions like that about Training Peaks. I'm like, what does this mean? I'm like, it's irrelevant. Just because it's advertised, just because Teeth and Training Peaks wants you to pay extra so you can see it, doesn't mean you need to worry about it. Period. The work is the work. You do your best. You listen to your body, and then you take that and you move on. And you hopefully do it better the next time. And you can either add minutes, you can add intensity, or you can reduce rest. That really is that simple. That's how you get better. Add duration, add intensity, reduce rest, or reduce rest. Like those three things, that's between, and when I say reduce rest, I mean reduce rest in between intervals. That's how you elicit responses, period. And you can't do all three at the same time, and you can't do none at the same time and expect to get a change. But the MEPS formula, is you and I like to call it, is kind of that that mental, emotional, physical rating. And if I was going to have somebody rate them all, it's like I would have them like a great mental and emotional day would rank higher than a great physical feeling day. Because if you're feeling great on those levels, you can probably do anything. But you can be feeling great physically and be a 10 on a 10, but you can be a 1 or a 2, mentally and emotionally, and those should be weighted heavily than the 10 you felt, physically. So you step on you're going to do a workout and you're filling out a form and you're like, all right, I got 25 minutes of threshold coming. And on day 1, you're a 10 out of 10 physically feeling, but you're a 1 or a 2 mentally, emotionally. Well, some people might say, oh, you feel great physically, you might hammer it out. But the increased stress emotionally and mentally is going to have a much higher increased response from stress and require a longer recovery than what it should say is like, let's reduce your 24-minute threshold down to 16. Even though you feel great physically, right? It's going to require more cost to recover because of the stress that you're under. And I mean, that's like, it's funny, right? You have to be like, well, what preceded you getting sick? And almost all people will tell you stress. Period. Stress preceded it. Some kind of a stressor, whether it was travel, whether it was work, whether it was personal, they would usually say stress. Or it would be stress reduced my body's ability to fight off whatever it was that was happening. But if I was totally healthy and I wasn't stressed, then my body could have fought it off on the regular and I'd be just fine. Like that's the impact that stress has on our body. And so again, when you consider that one last rep or that one last, interval scheme or that one last mile, on your run, or that adding that 10 minutes or cutting your main set short because you're a little bit, do it. And if you wake up the next day and you feel incredible and you're back to it, then maybe add one. But to me, that's how, again, and you can't prescribe, that's the thing, you can't prescribe that perfectly every day because you don't have any idea. Even if you're self-coach yourself, you have no idea what you're going to feel the next day. You can't plan. It's almost impossible to plan the perfect week. But you can plan to perfectly execute the week to the best of your ability by doing kind of like we always say when, with racing. You can only control two things, effort and execution. That's it. So control your effort and your execution. And I think when people hear execution, they hear like perfect adherence to the program or the plan. But no, perfect execution is leaving the workout as your coach intended you to leave it. And I have a hard time believing most coaches want you to leave even the hardest workout totally laying on the floor, reduced sleep, increased sugar cravings and appetite, sweating, for the rest of the day, chill. I don't want you. That's not good for your body's telling you whatever I did was not okay. Yeah. Period. And it's also enlightening to see because I know I'm like this. The first kind of inkling I get in my body that I might be getting sick is during a workout. Go out for a run, you're like, ooh, my heart rate is a little bit higher than what it normally is. I need to back it back down, or maybe shorten things up today. That's how intimate that connection is between stress and illness and sickness is, and with our body and what we're asking it to do from an exertion level. And I just think we have to do a better job of paying attention to it. But the complexity that comes with that is that there is no device that's going to tell you what to do, how to do it, and the perfect answer and response. And that's just something we have to continue to learn and educate ourselves with through practice and through how we do our workouts, how we adapt to them, how hard we go, how easy we go, and then ultimately just respecting the overall load that we're in all areas.
That MAPS thing, the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual combination of how we feel, if we think of everyone every day as like on a scale of 1 to 10 or whatever, I think we all, obviously want to feel like a 10 across the board, but some days, you might feel like a 4 across the board. And I think like one of the things I try to think about is I try to move the needle, but not, blast it. So it's another, if I feel like a 4 in some areas, I just say, let's just get to a 5 or 6 because, it's those gradual like shifts that can make a difference. And I think a lot of times, and I've done this in the past where I felt, maybe like a 3 or 4 physically. And I thought, I need to prove that I can get this up. And then I go out and put all that stress like you're talking about on top of it. And it's just not the right play. So I do think you can shift things and move things. It's like take small steps and kind of change the way you feel, but not try to make it, majestic along the way. And there's just these little nuances that I feel are really interesting. You might feel like mentally just like drained or whatever, but how can you just kind of shift that a little bit instead of going the other way?
That should be the title of the podcast. Don't be majestic.
Don't be majestic.
Don't be majestic.
All right, maybe.
I like. Yeah, I guess exactly. Whatever your majestic is. As always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me specifically, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, dude.
Check it Thursday.
All right, man. See ya.